Okay. So once again, welcome to the Columbus Karma Take-Some Choling's book club on the 37 practices of a Bodhisattva. We're using as our guide the commentary by Khenpo Sultram Gyamtso Rinpoche. And for those of you who let's see if we can find this for you. If you have not downloaded the book yet, you can do so at the link that I'm going to send you in chat. And this will be for everybody. You can download this ebook. It's free. And this is the book we'll be using. In case people were not able to download the book, I am going to have it on a screen share for part of this evening. So you'll be able to follow along in the book as we look at the 37 practices. Last time we got together, we talked a little bit about the types of things we wanted to learn about. We wanted to learn about the Buddha's teachings on bodhicitta, the mind of awakening, the mind that wishes to awaken from the sleep of ignorance, and the mind that wishes to awaken to one's own Buddha nature. We talked a little bit about the Bodhisattva commitment. Bodhi again means awakening. Citta means mind. Bodhi means awakening, and Sattva means a person who has the Buddha mind. And there are two kinds of bodhisattvas. There's the bodhisattvas in training who take the bodhisattva vow, and the bodhisattva vow is a vow of training. When you take the bodhisattva vow, you're saying, I will work toward enlightenment for the benefit of all sentient beings. And we make the aspiration that we will practice as the bodhisattvas and Buddhas of the past have trained. And so the bodhisattva vow is not a vow of perfection, saying, I'm going to be perfect right now. I'm from now on, I will be perfect and never be imperfect again. That's not what the bodhisattva vow is. The bodhisattva vow is a vow saying, I will train as the Buddhas of the past have trained. And how did the Buddhas of the past train? They trained in practicing what are called the 6 perfect virtues of generosity, ethics, patience, diligence, meditation, and wisdom. And so these 6 perfect virtues were how the bodhisattvas of the past trained, purified their negativities, and became awakened beings themselves. And so when we take the bodhisattva vow, we're not vowing that we would be perfect immediately. What we're vowing is that we're going to work on it, and that we're going to do our best to put our effort into practicing love and compassion through the 6 perfect virtues. And by practicing the 6 perfect virtues, that we're going to develop our love and compassion and develop the mind that wants to awaken. So that is what the subject of the book is how a person enters the bodhisattva path, how one travels the bodhisattva path, and how one learns to benefit other beings and attain enlightenment. So so that's a little bit about what we're going to what the entire book is about. And this particular book was written in the 13th century. 13th over the 14th century by the Tibetan saint Ngulchu Thogme. And it's actually such a well-known book that many great masters have written commentaries on it. And many great masters have used it as their guide for practice. So I was joking around with everybody, and I don't have my gold book with me, but I was showing everybody the gold booklets, and it turns out we might actually have a source for more booklets. And so what I'm letting people know is that if they want one of these really beautiful, upside down, these beautiful gold booklets to use as part of their practice, they can I'll give you a place to write, and you can write and put your postal mailing address. And I know somebody said, woo, yes, yes, you too can have this. These were made by students of Khenpo Tsultrim Rinpoche in Taiwan. And we think we have located the center where they were printed, so we think we can get more. And part of the reason that we were talking about this book and the practice of the 37 practices is that Khenpo Tsultrim used to tell his students when they would ask him, oh, Rinpoche, please teach us about compassion. He would say, here's the 37 practices of a Bodhisattva. Please read this book out loud 1,000 times, and then come back and we'll talk about it. And so many of Khenpo Tsultrim's students then undertook the practice of reciting this book 1,000 times. And you can see these little circles. See the little circles? People would fill in the little circles and finish 1,000 recitations of the book. Now you might say, well, what's the value of repeating a book over and over again? Isn't that a little bit silly? Isn't that a little extreme? And the answer is, if we look at the Buddha's teachings, the Buddha said, what did the Buddha say was the cause of suffering? The Buddha said that suffering is part of our life. That's the first noble truth. Second noble truth is that suffering has a cause. And the cause of suffering, he said, is not something external. The cause of suffering comes from within us. And it comes from our own clinging and grasping at things. We grasp at people, we grasp at situations, we grasp at objects, we grasp at emotions. And all of these things we grasp at cause us suffering. And so the thing that we cling to the most is our sense of self, me or I. And so this is why love is, I guess you could call it, love is sort of the anti-ego treatment. If we develop love for ourselves and love for all beings, this helps to loosen the grip of our fixation on ourselves and allows us to open to others and to benefit others in ways we couldn't before. And so the third noble truth is that because grasping is the cause of suffering, if we learn to let go, then if we let go of grasping itself, if we let go of grasping toward other things, if we let go of grasping, then we will suffer less in this life. And the fourth noble truth is the path of how to let go. It's the techniques of how to let go of grasping and clinging. and so this is what is covered in the practices of a bodhisattva. And so if we're trying to learn how to love ourselves and how to love others, we need a technique, we need a method. And the 37 practices of a bodhisattva teach us how to practice love in all kinds of situations, many of them very difficult. So, and so this, the recitation of this book so many times means that the book itself will come alive for us as we read it. When we read the book out loud, we begin to internalize the teachings that are in the book. And when we internalize the teachings that are in the book, we find ways, new ways to actualize them in our lives. And so it is that Khenpo Tsultrim had his students repeat this so many times. How do human beings learn anything? They learn anything through repetition. That's how we learn to tie our shoes. That's how we learn our alphabet. This is how we learn mathematics. We learn it by memorization and repetition. And so if we want to be a better person, then learning how to practice love and compassion in our life is going to be the method. Now, before we go to the book for today, I want to let everybody know that if you want to, you can, if you can, I'm sorry, I had a message come through and I thought it was somebody who needed to be let into the class, but it's not. But still, it distracted me a bit. If you have questions you would like to ask during the session today, if you wouldn't mind typing them into chat, I will stop occasionally to ask for questions. So if you have any questions about anything that's been said thus far, or maybe from your own reading, you can type the questions into chat now. And then when I pause for questions, I'll get to those questions first. And then after I've handled questions from chat, then we can open it up to people who are joining by audio. So if you want to type any questions that you have, go ahead and type them in now. And then when I pause after the first part of the presentation, then I can handle the questions in chat. So thank you in advance for your understanding on that. Okay, so I'm going to start with a short prayer. And this is a prayer of taking refuge in the Buddha as the teacher, the Dharma as the path, and the Sangha as the community. I'm going to be reciting it in the Tibetan language. If this is a prayer with which you're familiar, you can join in. And if it's a prayer with which you're unfamiliar, you can join in your heart and in your mind, thinking that you dedicate this session to the benefit of beings. O Sanje Chudon Sochi Chonam La Jang Chu Pardu Dani Kyap Suchi Daji Jin Soji Pe Sunam Ki Drola Penshir Sanje Druparsho. And then I'll recite the four immeasurables, the prayer of the four immeasurables. O Palden Sawe Lama Rinpoche Tagi Chiwar Pede Den Shula Kadrin Jambogone Je Sunte Kusun Tuging Udrup Sal Du Sol. Okay, and I'm sorry, I said the four immeasurables, and so I'll recite that in English. Hang on a second here. Okay. The four immeasurables go like this. May all beings be happy and have the causes of happiness. May they be free from suffering and the causes of suffering. May they never be separated from the highest bliss, which is free of suffering. May they come to dwell in great equanimity, free of attachment and aversion to those near and far. Okay. So last week we talked a little bit about the book, the 37 Actions of a Bodhisattva, and we said that it was based on the composition by Ngulchu Thogme. And I'm going to try to put this on a screen share, see if I get lucky, and see if it's here or not. Yay, it worked. Okay, so this is the introduction to Khenpo Tsultrim's book. He talks a little bit about the basic structure of the text here. And he says that it illustrates the complete path of the Bodhisattva in a total of 43 verses, which include a verse for each of the 37 practices and an additional 2 verses in the beginning and 4 at the end. The first 2 are traditional ones in which Ngulchu Thogme praises the qualities of the Bodhisattva Chenrezig and states his purpose in writing the book. The main body of the text is divided into 3 parts, the first of which deals with the causes that give rise to bodhicitta, the mind of awakening. And the mind training of a superior individual is discussed in the second part of the text, where the central topic is how to engender supreme bodhicitta. In this section, there are 5 main divisions that give advice on how to develop bodhicitta and how to keep it from degenerating. So, this is very important. Part of the reason I wanted to cover this material tonight was because frequently when people read the 37 practices, they focus a lot and are concerned a lot about the middle part of the text, because the middle part of the text talks about how to practice bodhicitta in the midst of terrible suffering and terrible misfortune. And it shows how the enlightened bodhisattvas act. And they say, well, I could never be like those enlightened bodhisattvas. I could never be like that. And so part of the reason I wanted to share this introduction this evening is because it puts this into perspective. The first part of the book is that deals with the causes that give rise to bodhicitta. And then the second part of the book is about how higher bodhisattvas, now this means bodhisattvas who are already partially awakened, how they train. And then the third division of the book is advice on how to develop bodhicitta and how to keep it from degenerating. And so those of you who remember the divisions in the Great Path of Awakening, which was the first book we studied in our mind training book club, was we studied the mind training in 7 points, and by Chikawa Yeshe Dorje, and from Jamgon Kongtrul's commentary, it's divided in pretty much roughly the same way. The first part of Great Path was divided into the preliminaries and main practice of the Path of Awakening, which consisted of learning the Guru Yoga practice, and then also studying the practice of meditation called Tonglen, or sending and receiving. You remember Tonglen? Tonglen is where you sit in meditation, and as you breathe out, you think you give happiness and goodness to all sentient beings. And when you breathe in, you think that you remove from them all of their pain, all of their suffering and difficulty. And that in the instructions we received, that when we breathe in this negativity, it meets our bodhisattva motivation, and all of the suffering dissolves into nothing and disappears. And then with the next breath, we breathe out happiness and goodness to beings. The next breath, we inhale and bring in the negativity of all sentient beings. It meets our basic pure nature. It dissolves into nothing and disappears, and so on. And so by practicing Tonglen in this way again and again and again, we train in love on the out-breath, giving goodness to all beings. And we train in compassion on the in-breath. You remember from the previous book club, we defined love as the wish for all beings to be happy, the wish for all beings to be happy, and compassion as the wish for all beings to be free of suffering. And so you can see how the practice of Tonglen is a rehearsal of sorts, rehearsing love on the out-breath, giving beings goodness, and rehearsing compassion on the in-breath by removing their suffering, dissolving it, and letting it disappear. And so this practice of Tonglen then is a really good practice on the cushion for us to do while we are studying these books. So one of the things I'll put up online tomorrow on the online page, online event page, and I'll put a link to it in the email that I send you, will be a very simple Tonglen practice taught by Khenpo Karthar Rinpoche in his book, Dharma Paths. I think you'll find it really useful, and it's very easy. And I recommend this practice to everybody, for everybody who's attending this book club, because I think you'll get a lot out of it. You don't have to practice it for a long period of time, 2, 3, 4, 5 minutes. It doesn't really have to be very long at all. But by practicing this basic Tonglen, Tong means to send and Len means to take. So when we send goodness, that's Tong. And Len, when we remove beings' sufferings, that's Len. So Tong Len. And so by rehearsing this over and over again, we'll be practicing not just the intellectual understanding of love and compassion that comes in the book, but we'll also be practicing a meditative discipline that mirrors what we're learning in the book. So I hope that you'll give this a try, and then we'll have a conversation next week about how how you found Tonglen, or what you liked about it, or what you found difficult about it. And so we'll bring that up in next week's class. Anyway, sorry, I intervened with that there, but I wanted to make sure that we understood a little bit about the Tonglen, but also a little about the structure of the book. And then in this introduction, he's at the bottom of this first column, he says, first one should realize the equality of self and other, and learn how to exchange one's own happiness for another's suffering, which is what you do in Tonglen. Now, when he says the equality of self and other, this is he's talking about it as though it's something we're already familiar with, but this was actually the teaching of the Buddha. The Buddha taught that all beings are equal in that they all want happiness. Trungpa Rinpoche put it this way. He said, it's not like 80% of sentient beings want happiness and 20% don't care. It's 100% of all sentient beings want happiness. And so as a result, the equanimity or the equality means that we all want to be happy, but we're all stuck in this cyclic existence that the Buddha called samsara. And we do things that actually are not in our own best interest. When we try to get something, sometimes we'll hurt other people as we attempt to get what we want. And we think that that's okay, but they don't think it's okay. And then arguments start, and then negative relationships keep going. And in this way, we cause ourselves trouble as we try to gain happiness. And so the teachings of the Buddha encourage us to know that all beings, even those who act badly, are simply trying to be happy. This doesn't mean we don't put criminals in jail. This doesn't mean that we don't take action to protect ourselves from harmful people. What this means is that we try not to hate, because hatred of another person or another thing, hatred actually doesn't hurt the other person nearly as much as it hurts us. Holding a mind of hatred is extremely painful and extremely difficult, and it can actually ruin our health. So we have to understand that by equanimity, we don't mean that we don't take care of or confront injustice. It doesn't mean that. It means that we find ways to understand why other people do the things they do in a way of not hating them. So that's just a little bit about this. At the top of the second column here, he says, the text also shows how to bring all situations of worldly life, including obscuring emotions and mistaken views, onto the path, and how to integrate them into one's practice. The third is how to practice the 6 perfections. The fourth describes how to work with one's negative side and one's failures. And finally, there's a summary and dedication. So the third main section is the conclusion, which is a recapitulation of the purpose of the text and the reasons that establish its integrity in relation to the tradition of the teaching, an apology for any errors that might be found, in a dedication. In summary, Ngulchu Thogme has given he has given the entire structure of a bodhisattva's path. The from first engendering bodhicitta in one's mind stream to maintaining and then further developing the bodhicitta up to the level of enlightenment. And so then he gives a little note here that when reciting the 37 practices as a dharma practice, it is recommended to read the prostration or the Namo Lokeshvaraya section at the beginning, and all of the epilogues A through E. The commentaries for each stanza should be read through to familiarize yourself so you can understand the practice. So, so when a person reads it, they should read the entire book. From the beginning to the end, not just the verses, not this commentary book. So that's a little bit about this, and in Khenpo Tsultrim Gyaltsen Rinpoche's aspiration here, he said, let's begin. May the virtue that arises from working with this text contribute to the liberation of all beings. It's a great aspiration for us to have every time we come to class. It's said that in the Bodhisattva path, your intention is everything. So if you can come to class thinking, oh boy, I'm going to learn something, that's a great motivation. But you can even do better. You can even say, my motivation for being here is because other beings are suffering and I want to benefit them. So that's another way that you could bring your aspiration to the class. And so he says, let us begin by developing the enlightened attitude. That's another word for bodhicitta, that we want to attain the perfect state of Buddhahood for the benefit of beings who are in number as vast as the sky. To accomplish this state, we must diligently engage in listening, reflecting, and meditating on the genuine teachings. And then he says, in general, the Mahayana of the great path of Buddhism contains two types of practice. One purifies obscurations, the other develops a sound motivation and a good attitude. The former practice, in which we purify our mind of mental obscurations and stains, is the progressive stages of meditation on emptiness, which we're not going to be studying here, but he did write a book on it earlier. And he said this text fits into the latter category, and its title in Tibetan is The 37 Practices of a Bodhisattva, a summary of the heart essence of a bodhisattva's conduct. And it's based on all the teachings of the Buddha in the sutras. And at the very bottom of this column, he says, the purpose of this book is to help us with our motivation. Sometimes we have a really hard time in life, and we feel kind of like we need to take care of and look after ourselves. But this type of teaching is for not just looking after ourselves, but also looking after others. So last week we covered the prostration at the beginning, Namo Lokeshvaraya, because it's in Sanskrit, because the Tibetan people are grateful to the land of India for giving them Buddhism. And Lokeshvaraya is the Sanskrit name for Chenrezig, the Bodhisattva of compassion. And so he says, you see that all phenomena neither come nor go, still you strive solely for the benefit of beings. Supreme Guru and Protector Chenrezig, to you I continually bow with body, speech, and mind. And so that's the first of that's the prostration. The second verse here is the author's intention. The perfect Buddhas, sources of benefit and happiness, arise from accomplishing the genuine dharma, since that in turn depends on knowing how to practice, the practices of a bodhisattva shall be explained. And so we covered these two verses last week. And I think we also covered the first one, which was practice number 1 of 37, which is the commitment that we make when we take on the bodhisattva path. Now that you have attained a precious human body, the great boat so difficult to find, in order to free yourself and others from the ocean of samsara, to listen, reflect, and meditate with diligence day and night is the practice of a bodhisattva. Now, we did cover this last week, and I pointed out the language that you see in the book, to listen, reflect, and meditate with diligence day and night is the practice of a bodhisattva. Now, we may look at this and say, well, there's no way I'm going to stay up all night and practice dharma. There's no way I'm going to stay up all night and practice in this way. But if we train our intention, this is really important. If we train our intention, then our entire life will become a practice of bodhicitta. Let me give you an example. One of the great bodhisattvas of the 20th century was the previous Kalu Rinpoche. The previous Kalu Rinpoche was quite old at the time of his escape from Tibet into the West. But after he escaped, he became well known as a teacher and was asked to go and teach in Europe and in America. And he made all kinds of aspirations. He wrote a prayer in which he said something to the effect of, may everyone who sees me, may everyone who hears my name, may everyone who I am connected with in any way, may they be benefited. He said this. And he said, when you waken in the morning, say, may I benefit beings today. When you go to sleep at night, say, may I benefit beings tonight. And during the day, may I benefit beings. He said, say it as many times as you can. May I be of benefit to beings. And you can. He said that by doing this, we are training our intention to be positive intention for the benefit of sentient beings. And so, if your wish is to benefit beings when you go to work, I actually used to do this when I worked in an office. I would start my workday by looking at my computer terminal, and I would say, may everything that I do today benefit beings in some way, and may we all come to Buddhahood. And then I'd start my workday. So the idea of listening, reflecting, and meditating day and night, we may not be able to do all of those things, but we can hold a pure intention, and we can express a pure intention. And I think that's going to be, that'll be a help for us in our practice. I'm going to go through maybe two more, and then we'll stop for questions. So let's go through practice number 2, which is detaching from passion, aggression, and hatred. Oh, by the way, in the previous section, Khenpo Tsultrim says that the listening and studying and meditating, he gives a couple of book recommendations here. He said this is he said you can read about all the freedoms and resources that make your human life precious, because we talked about this last time. Remember, we have the precious human life, and that we can understand the Dharma, we connect with it, and we can practice it. And so he said, this is not the time or place to explain all of these factors, but Jamgon Kongtrul wrote a book called The Torch of Certainty, and Gampopa's Jewel Ornament of Liberation presents it in an extensive explanation. So if you're interested, you can study one or two of these books. And just as an item of interest, the Columbus Karma Thegsum Choling has just undertaken a 12-week study of the Jewel Ornament of Liberation. And it's on Sunday mornings at 11:30 a.m. Eastern Time for the next 12 weeks. And you can go to our website at www.columbusktc.org and click on the virtual shrine room to get your Zoom coordinates and join us. If you can't join us at that time, you can go to the Columbus KTC YouTube page, and the first 2 of the 12 are online already. So 2 of the lessons have already been put online. We're studying the Trungpa Rinpoche commentary on the Jewel Ornament. That's just a little extra piece there. Practice number 2, detaching from passion, aggression, and hatred. So remember, the first part of the book is like, what are the things that move us to practice Dharma? And he's going to tell you right now. Passion towards friends churns like water. Hatred towards enemies burns like fire. Through dark ignorance, one forgets what to adopt and what to reject. To abandon one's homeland is the practice of a bodhisattva. Now, I also want to call to your attention the use of irony and the use of exaggeration. You'll see irony and exaggeration used as teaching techniques in these verses, because usually it is the use of irony here is he's saying to abandon one's homeland is the practice of a bodhisattva. So most people would think that embracing your homeland would be what a good person would do. But what he's telling you to abandon is not necessarily where you live, but what you're attached to. Because what are we attached to? Passion towards friends churns like water. Hatred towards enemies burns like fire. Through dark ignorance, one forgets what to adopt and what to reject. These are called the 3 mental poisons: attachment, aversion, and bewilderment or ignorance. Attachment, aversion, and ignorance. Those of you who are familiar with Buddhist iconography are familiar with the image called the Wheel of Life. that depicts all of the realms of samsara and all of the various sufferings of samsara in the form of a wheel. What is depicted in the hub of the wheel, the little engine that keeps it turning? 3 animals, 3 symbolic animals, symbolic of attachment, which is symbolized by a rooster who is always fighting with others to protect his flock. Second, a snake, which symbolizes the striking of anger, and a pig, which, although I know my animal-loving friends tell me that pigs are very intelligent, but they are used in traditional iconography to symbolize ignorance, because I think probably because they will eat anything. And so, so an average person would think, well, that's not very smart. Anyway, in any case, whatever the reason, these 3 animals, attachment, aversion, and ignorance, are depicted at the center of the wheel of suffering. And so what we have to recognize is that any place that inflames our negativities is a place that we should really think twice about hanging on to. In his commentary, Khenpo Tsultrim says in the middle of this large paragraph on the right-handed column, he says, in the grasp of attachment and aversion, passion and hatred, hi there. I have to figure out how to do that again. Let's see if we can, let's see, mute participants. Yeah, I have to remind everybody that we are muting for a reason, and it's so sounds from your house will not make it to the recording. Sorry about that. And so he says, in the grasp of aversion, passion, and hatred, one forgets what to do. This forgetfulness is described as the darkness of ignorance. Then he says there's 2 ways to give up one's homeland. One is by directly abandoning it, just packing up and departing. The other is to relinquish one's attachment to home by not taking it to be truly existent. The latter is the more important. The homeland in some places is called fatherland, in others it's called the motherland. It is the land of our birth or any country to which we are attached. We are bound not by the country itself, but by taking it to be real. Now, what he's saying here when he says taking it to be real means that we take it to be real, solid, permanent, unchanging, and good. We take it to be what it appears to be and grasp it as though it were an absolute in our life. Therefore, it's very important to know that the fatherland, motherland, or homeland do not truly exist as such. And then it talks about Gampopa, the great teacher, who did not leave his homeland. He stayed in the region of Dakpo, but because he was able to abandon attachment and aversion, he was able to achieve enlightenment by staying in his homeland. And then the next verse, and then we'll stop for questions, is practice number 3, relying on solitude. Giving up negative places, mental afflictions gradually decrease. With no distractions, virtuous activities naturally increase. When mind becomes clear, certainty in the dharma is born. To rely on solitude is the practice of a bodhisattva. So I know a lot of people who are practicing the teachings of 12-step recovery, and they talk a lot about this first part, giving up negative places. If we stay away from dangerous and negative places, then our mental afflictions will gradually decrease, which also will decrease the reliance on addiction. And so this is, I think, something that we all know from our own experience in our world, that when we stay in places that rile up our negative mental afflictions, they just, it's almost like it's an engine that just keeps rolling and rolling and rolling. And but if we can give up attachment to those places and abandon them, then our mental afflictions will gradually decrease. And if we have no distractions, virtuous activities will naturally increase. When the mind becomes clear, certainty in the dharma is born. And so to rely on solitude is the practice of a bodhisattva. And so Khenpo Tsultrim explains negative places are places where one cannot practice the Dharma at all, or where unfavorable conditions make one neglect one's practice. Yeah, Khenpo Karthar Rinpoche, when we were first involved in Dharma, he said, demons don't always have fangs. The demons that disturb your practice don't always have fangs or horns. He said, they could be the people who look like your friends and say, please don't practice Dharma, come and play with us instead. And so he said, they don't, those beings that want to disrupt your practice are not necessarily looking evil. In any case, Khenpo Tsultrim says, by giving up such places, afflictions will subside. They won't be eliminated at once, but will gradually diminish. First the coarse ones, and then after that, the subtler ones. Then he said, solitude clears the minds and sharpens the awareness. Anybody who's done any kind of retreat knows that when we are distant from such things as our cell phones and all of the fuss and all of the difficulty of everyday life, our minds do naturally begin to settle. And so he said, then from this mental clarity, certainty and deep trust in the Dharma are born. He said, male and female bodhisattvas do well to occasionally seek solitude. So I encourage people from time to time, even if all you can do is take one morning off and just relax, read Dharma books, do some meditation, do some mantra recitation, and come to an understanding of the value of solitude for yourself. Even if you can just take a couple hours off and do something like that, it'd be really good, a little short retreat. Then he says, to reduce mental afflictions, abandoning negative places benefits both the beginning practitioner and the bodhisattva who is an ordinary being. Because remember, there's two bodhisattvas, the higher bodhisattvas who have attained some level of awakening, and then the rest of us who are bodhisattvas in training, who have our learner's permit. So he says this will help all of these beings. And he says, but if one is an Arya Bodhisattva, that means Arya means higher, who dwells on the bhumis, and by bhumis they mean the levels of awakening for a being who has already broken through samsara and has become an awakened being. He said, then there is no need to abandon places of negativity. It's actually preferable for bodhisattvas who know how to take negative places to the path to remain where they are. And so he talks about some bodhisattvas taking birth in countries where conditions for Dharma practice are not very good, and for the benefit of bringing Dharma there. And so then he talked a little bit about the situation of Marpa the translator, who lived about a little bit like, let's see, 900 to 1,000 years ago. He traveled to India 3 times. And in his last visit, he wanted to, an activity in accord with Naropa's prediction that Marpa would return to the land of his birth in order to spread the Dharma. And this is exactly what he did. And so Naropa, on all of his visits, gave him teachings and sent him back to Tibet. And then through Marpa, he taught Milarepa, and then Milarepa's student also was born far from the central part of Tibet. But as Jetsun Milarepa predicted, Rinpoche went to Yarlung near Lhasa, excuse me, and built a monastery there. So they talk about how beings will practice with this on the relative and ultimate level. Then he said, on the ultimate level, Milarepa realized the equality of friends and enemies. On the relative level, he developed pure love and compassion for all sentient beings, friends and enemies alike. As a result of his bodhicitta, even his worst enemies became his disciples. We too must meditate on loving kindness and compassion for all sentient beings without distinction. Maybe we can develop bodhicitta in this life, but maybe not. If not, there is a good chance it will arise in a future life. So I'm going to take a moment here and stop the screen share and see what questions have arisen in the chat. The first one from Tom. Hi, Tom. His question is taking the Bodhisattva vow similar to the lay precepts? And is it that you aim to do your best and diligently uphold and maintain? Yes, as a matter of fact, the Bodhisattva vow is a little different from the lay precepts, where in taking the 5 lay precepts, we do our best not to kill, not to steal, not to lie, not to commit sexual misconduct, and not to take intoxicants. Now, you can take 1 of those or 2 of those or 3 or 4, but you have to do your best every day not to do the negative things that you promise not to do. In the lay precepts, there are specific actions that break the vow. And because this vow is from the Hinayana tradition, once it's broken, it can't be retaken. So if you kill a human being with intention, that breaks the vow of not killing. If you steal something of value, of great value, then that's breaking the vow against stealing. If you tell someone that you are an enlightened being when you are not, that's breaking the vow of not lying. And then taking any mind-altering substance is the violation or the breaking of the intoxicants vow. And sexual misconduct is sexual relationship with anyone who is inappropriate partner. So that means if you're a married person, it means adultery and so on. So these vows, because they come, the lay precepts, because they come from the Hinayana, once they're broken, they cannot be retaken. However, the Bodhisattva vow coming from the Mahayana is about one's intention. The Bodhisattva vow is about one's intention, and therefore it's going to be broken every day, several times a day, and it needs to be retaken morning, afternoon, evening. And then if one practices the overnight session, one would also take it overnight. But most of us are sleeping at night and not on retreat. So we'll only be renewing the Bodhisattva vow morning, afternoon, and evening. And so it is, you do your best to keep the vow. And the main aspect of the Bodhisattva vow is that you'll do your best to benefit sentient beings. The breaking of the Bodhisattva vow is by holding ill will against any person for longer than a few hours of time, which means that we will be contravening and denting and so forth the Bodhisattva vow all day long. That's a violation of the vow. The breaking of the vow, I'm sorry, I made a mistake. I said breaking, but I meant denting and damaging the vow by holding an ill will toward other people for a period of time. But the breaking of the vow is to take the attitude toward a specific being. Even if I can help you, I won't. I hate you so much, I abandon you, I will not help you even if I have the opportunity. This is the breaking of the Bodhisattva vow. And once the Bodhisattva vow is broken, you have to take it again, preferably from a master. But if you don't have access to a master, you can imagine the Buddhas and Bodhisattvas in the sky and confess your violation of the vow and then retake it in their presence. And so we're always going to be denting and damaging our Bodhisattva vow because it's really hard for us to not have ill will or negative feeling or be angry or whatever. So as a result, we're always going to be acting toward beings in ways that are inappropriate. But we do our best to uphold the vow by retaking it morning, afternoon, and evening. And each time we retake the vow, morning, afternoon, and evening, we perform a small confession practice where we say, like in the 7-branch prayer, where we say, I confess all of the wrongs I have done when influenced by defilements, may these be purified. And so then you retake the Bodhisattva vow. And so it's a practice all its own that helps us to see. This is the cool thing. This is why keeping the Bodhisattva vow is not as hard as you might think, because you're always purifying it and always retaking it all day long. So morning, afternoon, evening. So that's that one. And now here's the next one. This is from Amy. Is Kempo commentary the one that is available on the web, or just the 37 practices? Amy, I'm not 100% sure I understand your question. Can you unmute and ask the question?
Yes. Just when you had put up, the Dharma ebooks that are available to us, I had never seen Kempo Sultrams. Of course, I love this little one.
Yeah,
but so I was curious if the Kempo Sultram Gamso's commentary is the ebook, or is it just the okay?
Yeah,
okay.
The ebook is his commentary. It was published as this book by the Marpa Translation Committee, but Dharma ebooks are great because they have, like, I don't know, 20 different books. It's really, and they're all free. So
yeah, thank you.
Thank you for asking. Here's a question from Judy. To abandon one's homeland, does this mean literally like where we geographically live, or is it more a metaphor for the homeland as living in samsara? And the answer is it's both. Kempo Sultram in his commentary said that for some people, they have to leave home. They actually have to leave home in order to practice because they're overwhelmed by all of the things that are happening in their world, And, but for other people, they can actually stay home, but abandon attachment, aversion, and ignorance. And so you can actually, in the example that Kempo Sultram gave, Gampopa stayed in his hometown for his entire life, and he still became an enlightened bodhisattva. So I think it depends on the individual. Most individuals will be a mixture of these two styles. They may need to take retreat from time to time to really practice seriously, because if people try to practice serious Dharma at home, they may run into some difficulty. I hope that helps. And here's a question from Jim. Please discuss meanings of practice 28. Okay, we'll get to that one. Bill's question, should we recite the prostration portion 3 times at the beginning of the recitation? No, I've never heard of that. So they just have you recite it once. In practice 1, this is from Mel. In practice 1, the text talks about the importance of listening, analyzing, and reflecting when learning the Dharma. I noticed that action was not a step. At my job, action is highly valued. Often the first 3 steps are done quickly or skipped altogether. How can I slow down? Oh yeah, I understand. I think hearing and contemplating and meditating. And I think the hearing the Dharma means you study the teachings or hear the teachings. Contemplating them is actually the next step. And it means that you turn them over in your mind and you think, is this true for me? Is this something I can rely upon or trust? And if you hear a teaching without really thinking about whether it's true or not, it's not really complete, is it? You've just read something, but it hasn't really been internalized. And if you haven't really internalized it, how can you meditate? And so it's really important to do the first 2 steps. And so what some people do in order to slow the process down is that they'll read a Dharma book and they'll make notes in the corners or the margins of the Dharma book about anything that they have a question about. Like, well, I don't understand this part, or I don't understand this part, or what does this mean? And so on. And by making notes in the Dharma book in the corners or in a notebook, writing down any question you might have, then you can ask one of your Dharma friends the questions, somebody who may have some more learning than you have, and then that you can get from them their understanding of what the meaning of the words are in the book. That slows down the process a lot, because otherwise, if you don't have a teacher or aren't working with someone, then you will just rush ahead and read all kinds of books, but not know what to practice. I remember this one gentleman came to one of Khenpo Karthar Rinpoche's teachings, and he went up to the microphone and he said, I took this teaching with this teacher, I took this teaching with this teacher, then I took like 3 empowerments, and then I took this teaching, and then I went on this retreat, and then I decided to change lineages, and then I decided to change lineages again. And now he said, I have all of these teachings that I've received, but I don't know what to practice. And Khenpo Rinpoche said, you know, I totally get where you're coming from. I can see how this is hard for you. He said, so maybe the thing to do at this point is to take stock of all of those things you've gathered, find what for you is the most important, and just whittle it down to a simplified practice. And he said to also encouraged him to find a teacher and to consider working with a teacher, because teachers help us in that sometimes we have blind spots where we don't see our own faults. You know, we may not have our faults or whatever. We just may not have them. You know, we don't know that we have them, and then we fall into them. And so as a result, then we fall into bad habits, and then falling into bad habits, we don't make progress, and then we get discouraged, and then we might think, oh, well, I better go here and do this. I better go here and do this. And so having a teacher can help us stay focused, and it can help us have a nice trajectory. For example, when Khenpo Karthar Rinpoche taught us at the KTC in Columbus, and then when he taught at KTD Monastery, he taught us in what some people might think of as a really boring way. He said, everybody starts with shamatha. Do shamatha meditation and read introductory Dharma books. Then he said, then learn the mind training traditions of the Mahayana, especially the 7-point mind training. He said, do that and learn how to practice Tonglen meditation. Shamatha meditation first, Tonglen meditation next. And then if people want to learn mantra practice, they can learn that anytime. Chenrezig mantra is easy to learn. And so he taught everybody from beginners to intermediate, everybody he learned Chenrezig. And then he said, then when you're ready, he said, you can undertake the practice of Mahamudra, which is our Karma Kaju lineage practice. And you start with 4 thoughts that turn the mind toward Dharma, where you contemplate. Then you practice the 4 parts of the extraordinary preliminaries called Nundro. And then after that, you undertake the practice of Mahamudra. So you might say that the way he taught was kind of boring. Shamatha, Tonglen, mantra practice, and Nundro and Mahamudra. So, but you might say it's boring, but by the same token, it was really straightforward. And shamatha leads people to recognize and see their faults. Tonglen helps them to start working with their faults and purifying and overcoming their faults. And then the Nundro practice helps them to turn their mind toward Dharma in a very definitive way and work on purifying their negativities. Because that's pretty much what Khenpo Tsultrim was saying in his introduction is the purpose of Mahayana Dharma. You're purifying your negativities and developing qualities. So anyhow, I hope this helps. Did this help with, I think I saw a thumbs up from you. Okay, good, all right, yay. Let's see. How do we find a teacher? Okay, Khenpo Rinpoche had advice about this. He said that the first thing you can do is to read a little bit about the Dharma, but learn how to meditate. And once you learn how to meditate, the next important thing is to actually practice. And as you practice meditation, and as you study the Dharma, slowly your behavior will change. You'll become a little bit more like the Dharma. You'll start to do virtuous things and try to abstain from doing non-virtuous things. And then that karma will gradually bring you into contact with teachers. Teachers will begin to naturally show up. You'll hear about them or you'll read about them. And then from there, you'll start receiving teachings from them. Khenpo Karthar Rinpoche said, because you have stumbled on this Dharma Center, because that's what he would tell people when they would come to the Columbus KTC. He'd say, hey, you're here. So why don't you kind of stay for a while and practice a little bit and see if this community is for you? And if so, just study with these folks and study the Dharma with them, and that I'll keep coming back and I'll keep answering your questions and so on. He said, your karma ripened in that it brought you here to a Dharma center. So why don't you stay for a while and see if it works for you? Which I thought was really kind of a smart way to come at it. And that after a while, after you begin to take teachings from teachers, after a while, you'll find one or two or maybe three teachers whose advice that they give you helps you. And these will be considered your branch teachers. And then gradually from among those few, you'll find one or two whose advice helps you the most, and those will become your root teachers. And so the branch teachers are people who you meet and so on, and you learn Dharma from. And then slowly, a few from among those, you may meet one or two whose advice helps you the absolute most, and those people will be your root teachers, and they'll be able to guide you on these steps, shamatha to Tonglen, to the Nundro practice, to Mahamudra. So hopefully it will be an organic process that is partially guided by your karma, what you have a connection with, a karmic connection with, but then also will be dependent upon your own practice, how you do with your own practice. Let's see. This is from Christine. These three are the first of the 10 Dharma practices. Is that correct? I hope I remember correctly what my teacher has taught me. Ooh, I'm going to have to get back to you on that one. Let me make a note about that, and I'll see if I'll have to look that up for you, okay? The 10 Dharma practices, and I'll have that for you next time. Okay. Okay, 10 Dharma practices. Yeah, I'll look that up for you. Okay, then the next one is, how can we tell that we've become over passionate with our friends? Oh yeah, well, here's the thing. We do become really attached to people. And there's some benefit in having attachment to people. It's great to have friends who can support us when we're going through good times and bad. So having friends is not the problem. It's clinging to them too tightly that it causes us so much angst, For example, I think that when we begin to expect that people will respond to us in a specific way. Now, it's one thing to expect your friends to treat you with respect. We're not talking about abusive situations here and sticking with abusive people. We're not saying that. But what I'm saying is that if we begin to expect too much of people who are our friends, and we begin to want them to act in ways that we want them to, if we find ourselves wanting to manipulate them in any way, shape, or form, then we've really, I think, crossed a line. And we have to look at ourselves and say, is it really the friends, or is it me and the way I cling to these people? Because when I was studying pastoral care, chaplaincy, and I was reading about chaplaincy, they said one of the biggest problems that people who are in the helping professions can fall into is that they can end up unintentionally using other people to get their own needs met. So if we need to have people praise us, or we need to have people fulfill parts of ourselves that we feel are wanting, if we inadvertently and really unintentionally end up using other people to meet our own needs, this is when we're crossing a line that's inappropriate. And I think that this would be one way of telling whether you've crossed a line. And if their behavior is not abusive, but it upsets you and you're always worrying about, well, like, what do they think of me? And do they like me? And so forth and so on. If we're worrying a lot, then that's probably a good time to start thinking about talking to a counselor or a friend who can help us to sort out our feelings about specific people. Sometimes that helps. I don't know if this was the meaning of your question, but feel free to ask a second question. You can unmute and ask a second question. Did I hit your question or not? Okay, I'm not hearing from that person.
No, yeah, that answers my question.
Okay.
I just wanted to be sure, because it feels like my friends that I'm aligning with, it's all feels very positive, and I do feel such joy, but I thought, is that even crossing a line? But it feels like it's a healthy thing. None of the things you were describing are occurring,
yeah.
But some of those things you are describing is from other people that I'm trying to maybe downsize those relationships.
Right.
So that's what I was just trying to clarify.
Yeah. Yeah. And in fact, we'll get toward a little more of this when we get into the fourth, fifth, and sixth of the 37 practices. It'll get a little clearer for you as we get into those. You'll see a little bit more about that, because we talk about bad friends here in a couple minutes. So that'll also clarify it for you.
Thank you.
Okay. No, thanks for your question. And this will be the last question in this, I think. Now, did I miss anybody? Hold it. Yeah, okay, good. I didn't miss it. Okay. And then, so this will be the last question in chat. In regard to number 3, it seems quarantine and solitude. Yeah, I know. Isn't all that conducive for practice? Any guidance? Yeah. I've talked to so many people who are missing what my friend calls vitamin H, meaning hugs. They're sort of missing the contact with other people, and it's really kind of hurting them. And I totally understand that that it's not, that people are really missing other people, and that not having people in your life is really complicated. And also there's the question of whether a forced solitude, which is what quarantine is, has not been conducive to practice. And I think that part of the reason for that is that for a lot of us, quarantine is a very stressful situation. Living during a pandemic is extremely stressful. I know people are trying to normalize, and they're talking about the new normal of doing things, but when we're living in a time where a disease could end up killing you or someone you love, this is a kind of existential threat that very few people have, that leaves few people unaffected. In other words, this is a very pervasive and scary situation for human beings, because we realize at moments like this that no matter how young we are, no matter how healthy we are still mortal, and we have no defense against specific pathogens. And so I think that this causes a lot of stress for people. And so in quarantine, they try to stay busy so they don't have to think about these threats. And I think that that's sometimes not conducive to practice. And so if we already, it's in the Jewel Ornament of Liberation, Gampopa talks about the 3 kinds of obstacles, the 3 types of laziness that prevent us from practicing. One is the laziness of indolence, where we just want to lie around and rest. The second one is the laziness of busyness, where we're just busy all the time, and then we have no time to practice because we're too busy. It's like an addiction to busyness. And the third is the laziness that comes from doubting ourselves too much, from denigrating ourselves and doubting ourselves too much. And I think it's the laziness of busyness that could be being addressed here. And so the only thing I can say is to continuously try to build periods in your day. A lot of us have these magic machines called cell phones, and I actually have on my cell phone, I have this. Maybe I'm trying to show it to you here, but I don't think it's going to work. Never mind. I have something on here that says how's your Bodhisattva vow going? Oh yeah, in fact, here it is. Yeah. How's your Bodhisattva vow? Anyhow, so and so it comes up from time to time, and it tells me to stop and think about what I'm doing. And so this type of reminder can help. The other thing is to try to keep a schedule as best you can and build practice into specific parts of your day, because almost everybody has a time of day when they take a break. And whether it's a coffee break or whatever kind of break it is, it's an opportunity to practice. And so you could actually even just do mindful breathing, do Tonglen for a minute or 2 or 3. And so I think that there's some positivity there. So I hope that'll help with your question. Okay, I know I said that would be the last question, but I forgot to ask people on audio. Does anybody on audio wish to ask a question who can't type into chat? Okay. Then if it's okay, we'll go back to looking at the, let's see, looking at the book. So practice number 4, abandoning attachment to this life. Yes, we're going to go there. Remember, I said they're going to use a lot of seemingly extreme stuff. So here it starts. Old friends and relatives will separate. Possessions gained with effort will be left behind. Consciousness, the guest, will leave the guest house of the body. To let go of this life is the practice of a bodhisattva. And so, again, for us, this may seem exaggerative. It might seem to be too much to let go of this life and not care about this life. It's very difficult for us to not care about this life. But what I think he's getting at is he's getting at the idea of holding on to that which is important and letting go of that which is not worthwhile. And so he uses death as the example. Old friends and relatives will separate. Possessions gained with effort will be left behind. When someone dies, they leave all of their possessions behind. Consciousness, even our consciousness, the guest will leave the guest house of the body. So knowing that death is coming is sometimes very difficult, but sometimes it can be an impetus to remember what's important in your life. What is the most important thing? And what would you want to be thinking about? And so Khenpo Tsultrim in his commentary says, death will separate us from friends and relatives, no matter how long we've been connected. And should someone ask why it's necessary to relinquish attachment to this life, the inevitability of death is the first reason. The second is that at the time of death, regardless of the extent of our riches or how hard we work to accumulate them, all material possessions, everything will be left behind. The third is that the body is a kind of hotel in which the mental consciousness, the mind, temporarily resides. And when we die, the consciousness departs and the body is put in a coffin or buried and burned. Therefore, there's no benefit in clinging to the body. For these 3 reasons, the practice of a bodhisattva is to mentally discard this life. And again, he's not saying to not take care of yourself. He is saying, think about what's important. This attitude does not mean giving it up, actually giving it up. It suggests developing an attitude of renunciation. By realizing that this life is just like a dream and an illusion, you can abandon attachment to it. And then he talks about in Tibet, human corpses were discarded in 4 different ways. Some of them were cremated in a fire puja, and the one was to bury the body, and then they would have a burial specialist, and that would come and dispose of the body. So we have the fire, and then we have the burial, and then another was to bury it in earth, and the other was to bury it in water. And the 4th is to feed the corpse to vultures, which you've seen, in Tibet, the whole idea of sky burial and things like this. And he talks about the charnel grounds and so forth, and the places where this disposal of corpses is done, and that great meditators would go and meditate there because it's kind of like the scariest possible place you could go. And in any case, the idea here is, by talking about these things, he's trying to create in us the thought that we might be able to leave behind the grasping and clinging to this life and to the success that we think we're getting in this life. And again, he's not asking us to give up our lives, especially if we have families, we have to take care of our families. If we have responsibilities, if we have employees working for us, we have to take care of our employees. If we have children and parents, we have to take care of them. But what we can abandon, so we can't abandon our children, we can't abandon our parents, but what we can abandon is our clinging to things and trying to control them. We can at least mentally give away all of our wealth to the Buddhas and Bodhisattvas, just mentally give it away. And imagine that they give it back to you for your use. I mean, the idea is that you mentally give it, and then you can benefit beings with it in any way you can. But I think the main point here is to recognize that there are limitations to what we can accomplish in this life, and to think about how we want our minds to be at the time we pass away from this life, and to really think about what's important. Those of you who studied the Great Path of Awakening will remember that near the end of the book, he talks about this. He says, this time practice what's important. And so, which means that he said, just remember, you've lived lots of lifetimes, and you haven't achieved enlightenment yet. So maybe it's important for you to try to achieve enlightenment this time around. So, look at what's really important, and so forth and so on. So anyhow, that's just I'll be drawing distinctions with the previous book, guys. Sorry about that. It's going to happen. Yeah, it's like, okay. So let me stop here for a second and see if there are any questions about this. I know this one is a little bit difficult here, but he's not asking you to throw your life away. He's not saying that. He's just saying, look at what's important to you. And try to think of what's important. Let's see what it says here. Practice 4 is like point 2 of the 4 reminders. Only the Dharma can help me at that time. Absolutely. There's a prayer text at the beginning of the Nundro, the Mahamudra Nundro preliminary text, and it says that at death there is no freedom, but karma takes its course. And that's actually number 3. Sorry about that. But at the time of death, that's impermanence, which is the second one. That's the one you were thinking of. And that because of impermanence, only the Dharma can help me at that time. I think that that's really true, because at the time of death, the only thing that's going to matter is not how much money you made, not even how many friends you have, not how many people love you, but how much Dharma practice you've actually done, because that is what's going to help you at that moment. This past week, I had I guess you could call it the sad honor of visiting a woman who was dying. And we talked about her practice, and she, she felt ready to go. She was in hospice care. But she felt badly about the fact that she hadn't practiced too much in recent years. And we talked about that. And I said that there's no problem with that, that that Dharma is always there for you. Doesn't matter how long it's been. And I guided her in a little meditation, imagining that Chenrezig was present with her, and then imagining that her own body was made of light and was slowly dissolving. And she said that was very comforting to her. And she did pass away day before yesterday. And I went over, or yesterday, and I did go to visit with her, and I did prayers for her after she had passed away. And she actually had a little smile on her face. So I'm hoping that that things went well for her. It was so cute. She said to me, she said, "I'm really happy we talked," she said, "because now I feel like I've been reinstated." You know, it's very sweet. I mean, people are so dear and you just love them so much, you know, because they're so sincere about Dharma and it means a lot to them. So for her, the Dharma was a comfort to her at that time. Okay. Any other questions? Okay. Then let's go on to look at number 5. This is the one I mentioned earlier. Practice 5, giving up negative friendships. When friendship with someone causes the 3 poisons to increase, degrades the activities of listening, reflecting, and meditating, and destroys loving kindness and compassion, to give up such a friendship is the practice of a bodhisattva. I have to tell you, every time that I go through this particular verse, somebody says, "But what if that person's in your family?" Invariably, someone will say, "Oh my gosh, you know, my grandfather or my uncle or aunt or something, they like drive me insane. What if they're in your family?" And the answer to that is, I'm super sorry. But it's, and if you have to, what my friends in 12-step like to talk about is they like to talk about detaching with love. Meaning that you get some distance from them and you love them from a safe distance and you pray for them. And you can do Tonglen for them, but it's sometimes you have to absent yourself from a relationship in order not to be too toxic for yourself. But they're talking here when friendship with someone causes your 3 poisons to increase: your attachment to increase, your aversion to increase, or your bewilderment to increase. And if friendship with that person degrades the activities of listening, reflecting, and meditating, and destroys your loving kindness and compassion, to give up such a friendship is the practice of a bodhisattva. So meaning, by the way, this terminology, it's always going to be in every verse. To do this is the practice of a bodhisattva. And part of the reason for this is so that it's to aid the memorization, because if the same verse is repeated again and again at the end, then it will help you memorize it. And so we don't want to abandon a sentient being, because remember, that was what we promised not to do when we took the Bodhisattva vow. So we can't mentally abandon someone, but we may need to physically absent ourselves from their presence. So we have to be very careful not to mentally abandon people, but to continue to pray for them and send love and compassion to them. But we may have to absent ourselves from their presence. And so Khenpo Sotrim says, if you're a special being, meaning an enlightened being, who possesses skillful means, you can carry all mental poisons and afflictions onto the path. That is, you can use them as a basis for practice. And the great masters of Mahamudra meditation, our Karmakaju practice, our main Karmakaju practice of Mahamudra, the great masters were able to be in the middle of terrible situations and be just fine. But he said, but if you're an ordinary person, then associating with negative friends will cause your 3 poisons to increase. This is the first reason to give up negative friendship. The second is to prevent your activities of listening, reflecting, and meditating from degenerating. And the third reason is that even if you've already developed some loving kindness and compassion, the influence of a negative friend will only impair those qualities and will hinder you from practicing them. These are the 3 reasons to give up negative friendships. But if this person is a person you are married to, if this person is, we need to have some conversation about that. And so he said, to clarify the respective meaning of ordinary being and special being, let's use the analogy. Consider the vast amount of waste eliminated by the inhabitants of a large city. Welcome to the world of Khenpo Tsultrim Gyamtso, who will use the most extreme analogy to describe something. So yes, here we go. Ordinary beings are disgusted by sewage and want to get rid of it. It's dirty, it smells, it breeds disease. But the farmer is a special being grateful to obtain what someone else rejects. His skill allows him to use this waste to fertilize his fields and make them more abundant. So you can see that there are two attitudes toward waste and what to do. It's the same with our 5 mental afflictions. Now you may say, wait a minute, I thought there were only 3. Well, if you study other texts, attachment, aversion, and ignorance will be joined by pride and ignorance. I mean, by pride and jealousy, okay? Attachment, aversion, ignorance, pride, and jealousy. So if you have skillful individuals, be able to carry them onto the path. For example, the Vajrayana teaches a practice called clear light meditation that transforms the afflictions of mental dullness into clarity while one sleeps. Using this practice, an Indian Mahasiddha named Lawapa realized Mahamudra by meditating his sleep for 12 years by the side of a busy road. This is how to take mental dullness under the path. If you're a skillful sleeper, then clear light meditation is the ideal practice for you. So, so I think we're going to stop there for today. And we'll start next time on practice 6, and then we'll run through some more of these. And so let me see what's in the chat. Is there such a thing as let's see if I make to the right sure. Is there such a thing as attachment to our practice? I would say that Khenpo Karthar Rinpoche said attachment to your practice is a good attachment and you need it. That's what he said, because he was asked this question once. He said you need to actually have some attachment to your practice so that you will do it. But I think where I would worry is I would worry about it if you are trying to use it like to cure illness or as like a superstition to keep bad things away from you. That would be the wrong kind of attachment to have to your practice. That's talked about in Great Path of Awakening in the section where he talks about don't turn a god into a demon. So that's in this particular book where you use dharma for non-dharma. Let's see, number 5, isn't it also possible to use a challenging relationship to practice patience and compassion? How do you know when you should give up the relationship instead of trying to work with it? Oh, I actually have the answer to this one because Khenpo Rinpoche was asked this question. And his answer was incredibly skillful. And so let's see what the next question is. Do we try to give up the harmful relationship, the codependency, rather than the person? Do we try to love with detachment? Well, of course, if a person can love, what Khenpo Rinpoche said, of course you should love people. He said you should love them as much as you possibly can, but you should love them without attachment. And that's extremely hard to do. It's really, really hard to do. So in any case, it's best to, if you are in a codependent situation, it's best to go to meeting groups like Al-Anon and to learn how to work with codependency from a pragmatic point of view, and then to be able to do Tonglen for people at a safe distance might be the best. So yeah, it depends on the individual. Some people can give up the codependency without giving up the person, but for other people, it's too difficult. And so these 2 questions I'm going to put together by telling the story. And I'm sorry, I am running over. I'm going to run over another 3 or 4 minutes here. Pardon me for that, but then I'll wrap it up. Someone came to the question microphone at one of Khenpo Rinpoche's teachings and said, my relative is an alcoholic. And because they are my relative and I love them, I have been giving them money. But I know that they are not using the money to take care of their family. They're using the money to drink. And so they said, I am ready now to stop giving money to this person. but I'm worried because this person is my relative and I'm supposed to help them and I'm supposed to love them. How do I know what to do? And Rinpoche, Khenpo Karthar Rinpoche's answer was incredibly skillful. He said, naturally we feel this way about people we love. He said, but he said, he said, right now we are not enlightened beings. And because we're not enlightened beings, he said, we have limits to our love and compassion. Enlightened bodhisattvas have no limits to their love and compassion, but because we're not enlightened yet, we do have limits. And he says, and so we have to recognize those limits and respect them. And he said, you'll know that you have gone too far with your love and compassion if you begin to resent the person you are trying to help. If you begin to feel resentment toward the person you are trying to help or toward the person you're working with, if you begin to feel resentment, this means you have actually gone beyond the limits of your compassion, he said, and you need to back up so that you don't feel that resentment. And he said, so what he recommended was that this person tell their relative, because the person did admit, yes, they were feeling resentment against the relative who was taking their money. And so Rinpoche said, well, then what you can say to this person is, I have helped you as much as I can. I can help you no longer. And so in a way, he was telling this person to detach with love so they could love the person at a safe distance and not feel that resentment. And so I think that each person is going to have to be honest with themselves about how they are feeling, that they shouldn't try to paint over or cover over how they really feel. And so if a person can stay in a challenging relationship and so forth, I think that that's incredibly useful. I see a hand raised. Would you like to ask a question? No? Okay. Just thought I'd ask because I saw a hand raised. Sorry about that. I misunderstood. Okay. So, in any case, I'm hoping that I still see that hand raised. Let's see if I can ask the person to unmute and see if that'll get the question asked. No. Okay. Sorry. So this is where we're going to have to stop for tonight. And again, I do apologize for running past your time. In answer to the gentleman who joined late, we will be making this available tomorrow on, this will be on my Lama Kathy YouTube page. And I don't think I can, I don't think I'm going to be able to, post the YouTube link right this second, but I will put it in the email that I send to everyone tomorrow. And again, just thanks very much, to all of you for the really, really great questions. And I recommend, I've already had one person write to me in this last week, and you know who you are, who said that they were going to undertake the recitation of the 37 practices more than 100 times. And so I'm super happy for that. And so so I will be telling you very soon how you too can get one of these books. I will give them to any person who agrees to try to read it 100 times. So if you want to do that, I will type in my email address. Actually, you can write to me at the email address that is on the Eventbrite and tell me, yes, I am going to recite this. I want to recite this 100 times, and then I'll send you the book. And so, yeah, absolutely, you can do that. So let's dedicate the merit of our session this evening. We dedicate the merit to all sentient beings, and we make the aspiration that all beings everywhere are freed from suffering, come to happiness, and then to Buddhahood. and coming to Buddhahood, may they emanate in all directions and benefit sentient beings endlessly. We dedicate the goodness with this thought in mind. Okay, thank you, everyone. And we'll see you next time. Feel free to, I'm going to turn off the recording now. Om Mani Padme Hum.
Thank you.
Thank you, Lama Kathy. Have